But we got a bunch of Green Lantern DC fans in here. Grow up reading Green Lantern? I know I did. What were some of your earliest Green Lantern memories? Just shout them out.
Jeff John's Rebirth.
Okay. John's Rebirth. Yeah, I definitely remember that stuff. All right. Well, I'm sure you guys are tired of looking at me already. So let's go ahead and introduce it. We have 5 amazing creative members from the Green Lantern universe, I guess would be a way to put it. They've all worked on Green Lantern at a time, as well as a number of other amazing projects, which we'll talk about. But alphabetically, I'll announce them here. Please welcome Darryl Banks, Pat Broderick, Mike Grell, Ron Marz, and Joe St. Pierre.
Pretty much, huh?
We have a full team here. Actually, we have a full team. We could probably just go ahead and make another Green Lantern book right here on stage.
I want the logo. Never reached the ground.
And I can move to the back if more of y'all want to sit up here as well.
Kind of nervous with Darryl being behind me.
Awesome, gentlemen. Well, thank you all for joining us. And we should have microphones for everybody. And as point out, if you can share the microphone back there. But we'll get some Q&A going. But I'm excited. I'm going to ask questions. I've got hopefully a good question for each one of you. But I'll start with you, Darryl, back there. One of the interesting facts I found out is that you were pretty much set since high school to be an artist. So it seems like you were since high school set to be an artist. That's when you decided you were ready to just go straight artist there.
That was when I began the desire to. Being ready, that was a whole other story. But yeah, that was true. That was when I decided that I wanted to do a profession where I didn't hate getting up in the morning to start my day, because I had so many relatives that they had good jobs, but they just didn't enjoy it. And I thought I need to love what I do. So.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool there. So Pat, penciled Batman Year 3, but more interesting, you were in DC's Junior Bullpen program.
Why do you want to win that?
I thought it was a fun fact.
That was before you were born.
Well, I'm probably older than I look, though.
Yeah, I think it was 74, 75.
It's a little bit before me. A little bit before me. There we go. Okay. All right, so we won't talk about too much then. Awesome. So Mike attended the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts.
Yeah, I went there because they claimed Walt Disney and Apple Foster among their alumni. Turns out that, yes, Walt Disney did go there until they expelled him, pissed him right out in the street. And Hal Foster and his buddy pedaled their bikes down from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and they attended every single art school in Chicago until the school got wise to the fact that they weren't paying tuition. And then they boot them out and they go on to the next school.
I did not know any of that, so that is, I'm sure most of us didn't, so that's a fun fact.
I didn't get expelled.
No, that's good. That's good. That was probably one of the questions coming.
I probably get cheaper.
There you go. Ron, so what's big for me, we already brought up my age here, so I grew up reading comics in the early 90s, so Witchblade was, we'll just say it was appropriate for my age. I loved Witchblade and everything Michael Turner did, but Ron, your name definitely jumped out immediately. You're part of Witchblade. I mean, what was it like working with Michael Turner in kind of the early Image comic days?
So you were too chicken to go buy Playboys, you bought Witchblade?
Yeah. Well, my dad would take me to the comic shop and was just like, okay, this is sure probably.
When you said appropriate for your age, I think inappropriate.
So I wrote like, I don't know, 80 or 100 issues of Witchblade, but I didn't work with Mike. I think by the time I actually started on the book, Mike had passed away. But I was friends with him. I mean, I knew him, and we knew each other. And so when Top Cow, so the genesis of it was when I worked for a company called CrossGen in Florida, that we're actually like on staff in the studio for about 3 years, and eventually if you spend too much money, they close the business on you, and that's how CrossGen went. So I left staff at CrossGen because I could see which way the wind was blowing. And I got a call from Top Cow saying, well, what, if you going to leave staff, do you want to do some work for us? And I said, yeah, that'd be cool. I'd like to do Magdalena, because I love that character and costume and the Catholic iconography and all that. And they said, yeah, that'd be cool. Why don't you do Witchblade instead? So, having actually never read an issue of Witchblade in my life up to that point, I said, well, you know, send me a box and we'll see. So they sent me a huge box, and it was Mike Turner stuff and all the other people. And it was kind of like, well, all right, let's give this a try. And 80 some issues later, I was still doing the book. So that's kind of how this works sometimes, is that the book that you don't have any affinity for as a fan per se is the one that creatively you can sink your teeth into, because you don't come to it with any predispositions. To a certain extent, that was what it was like for me with Green Lantern. I read Green Lantern, but I wasn't a huge Green Lantern fan. It was just one of the books that I thought was pretty cool, but I didn't have a deep-seated desire to write Green Lantern until the offer came, and then you kind of figure out, all right, well, how does this work for me? How can I make this book interesting for me as a reader? Because I think that's how you have to approach stuff as a writer, is you write the stories you want to read.
And Joe, you work with Valiant Comics, which seems to just be growing by the day as a major, like becoming a big player in the publishing. Do you still work with them, or, I mean, I know... I don't think you're...
My first professional gig was with Valiant Comics. I created a few characters there. I created a series called Secret Weapon, which I wrote and drew. There's a few characters in there, Livewire and Stronghold, which are still kind of used today. But once I left there, I moved on to Marvel, DC, Spider-Man, Venom miniseries, so I haven't done much with them since, really.
And Ron, you kind of answered it, but I think for everybody here, the big question, as the panel kind of highlights, Green Lantern. So what was the start like for each of you? Were you eager to get into it, or were you approached, or how did that, I guess, relationship with Green Lantern start for each of you?
So I'll answer that, but first, I'm sitting here watching Mike Grell draw, so that's kind of cool. For me, I was working at Marvel, and I had actually been at the Marvel offices during the day to fight with my editor about Thor, which I was writing at the time, and it was just awful. And we were trying to work out what I was going to do with my second year on the book, and he couldn't give me a straight answer, and it was a very frustrating day. So I came home and hopped a train back to upstate New York from Manhattan, and about 8 o'clock at night, DC called, and I had done a few Green Lantern core tales, just some 8 and 10 page stories here and there for DC. I was just kind of wading into the waters there, and they called and offered me Green Lantern. That's not a usual call you get at 8 o'clock at night. Like editors actually go home and have lives. So when the phone rang at 8 o'clock and it's DC, you know that something weird is up. So the phone call came from my editor, Kevin Dooley, who was the Green Lantern editor, but also Archie Goodwin and Mike Carlin and Denny O'Neil were in the room. That was sort of the triumvirate of editors at DC that ran the place. And Paul Levitz, the publisher, was on the phone. So this was not like a, hey, do you want to do this gig for us? This was obviously a more important call than that. And then they said, do you want to do Green Lantern? And I was like, sure, that'd be cool, because I love that Hal Jordan costume, that Gil Kane design, and do space opera. And then they said, yeah, well, here's what your first story is going to be. So I said, oh, okay. So I actually had to think about, I told him I wanted to think about it, because I knew it was obviously going to be a controversial story, a big deal story, following on the heels of the death of Superman and breaking of Batman. So I literally thought about it for a week and went back and forth on whether I should do the gig, and finally decided, well, if I don't do it, somebody else is gonna, and I want to do my version of it. So I agreed to do it, and then it was kind of like a fire alarm, because issue 48 was going to be my first issue, and we were already way late on it. So I had to write issues 48, 49, and 50 all at the same time. So I wrote like 5 or 6 pages of each of those, and then went back and finished them because we had 3 different artists, him being one of them, working on 3 different issues because they had made the decision to do Emerald Twilight late enough in the cycle that I think was issue 48 actually solicited already that never came out. Your issue 48?
What's the cover? I started.
No, it was not me.
No.
When I did the cover to 48, I think I had already begun working on 50.
Okay, so Darryl actually drew pages from issue 50 like he drew 2 issue 50s. He drew one that never got printed, and then he drew mine. And the one that you drew,
It's like 6 pages.
6 pages. So yeah, it was like a mad scramble. I actually remember writing pages for one of those issues at a Peter Gabriel concert, like between sets, because we were really late. It was they had made this decision late enough in the process that there was no. I mean, frankly, Emerald Twilight should have been like a 6-issue story, and although if we did it now, it'd be like a 48-part miniseries instead of 3 issues. But I mean, it was a truncated story, but we had to go like right then, and that's why Bill Willingham drew 48, Fred Haynes drew 49, and Darryl drew 50, and they were all working on pages at the same time. And so I wrote basically everything out of order. So if it sucks, that's what I'm going to blame it on. But it was it was an exciting opportunity, and to me, DC gave me like a page and a half of notes about what they wanted those 3 issues to be. And then the last line of the notes was, and you created a Green Lantern. And that's really the only direction they gave us in terms of creating who the next star of the book was going to be, and they kind of let us just run with it. So we actually, I always say that we got the best of both worlds. We got to inherit the legacy and the mythology that these guys worked on and constructed. We got to have all that stuff, but we got to have it through the eyes of our own main character, so we really got to have our cake and eat it too.
Fantastic. Other early experiences with Green Lantern, or getting the job and everything? Yeah.
Sure.
Come on, Mike, geez.
The thing that got me into comics in the first place was that when I was in Saigon in 1970, a guy came carrying about a dozen of his favorite comic books. And in there was the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams, and Dick Giordano run on Green Lantern, Green Arrow. And that was what triggered it for me. When I was able to get work over at DC Comics, one of the first projects that I had, I did backup stories for both Green Arrow and Green Lantern. And then I was fortunate enough to be in the office the day Denny O'Neil decided that he was going to resurrect the title, and went straight to his office and said, "What do I have to kill?" and that's how I got the book. For that and a 45 automatic. That'll do it every time. The 45 is a different story. But that's literally how I got on the book. One of the things that I really enjoyed was having the opportunity to work with Denny. I learned more about good writing by drawing the stories that Denny wrote. He taught me an awful lot, including when to shut up, which that's not going to happen today, of course. but he taught me the value of silence on a page. Putting air in between the balloons so you don't have stacks and stacks of balloons all the way across the top of the panel and down the side borders and everything else. Denny had a hard and fast rule that he always broke and encouraged everybody to break. But as rules go, it's pretty good. He would say, no more than 12 words per balloon and no more than 100 words on the page. And of course, we always broke that, but it's good to have that in mind. And like I said, talking the value of silence, the beat panel, the panel that goes between the action panel. Somebody says something, and then there's a beat before they say something else. And you can do that either with spacing between the balloons, or you can add a beat panel. An example that I've done wherever. I once loved a woman who swore she'd never leave me, she died. That's all I know. Or you could do, I once loved a woman who swore she'd never leave me, and then a beat panel, and then another panel, she died. It's more powerful. But as far as my experience on Green Lantern goes, I always loved that Gil Kane costume. Once I figured out that the ring wasn't dragging him around every place. See, when I was a kid, when I first read that, I thought the guy must have the strongest finger in the world. Wherever the ring goes, you're going.
Do you have a story for us, Brian?
No, not really. No, I was fortunate enough to be asked to work on the Green Lantern series back when they relaunched the title. So I was on the book for, I think, about 2.5 years, and they were rotating artists. So I found it very inspiring, because I'd always loved anything Gil Kane drew. If they had offered me the Atom, I would have taken it. If they had offered me Green Lantern, I would say I took it. And I was fortunate enough that the storylines for the first year were all really, really well-written stories. Some very nice old villains like the Tattoo Man, which I thought was a great story in itself with Guy Gardner. And then they moved on into the Emerald Dawn storyline. So towards the end of that, things that happened were necessitated that I move from DC to Marvel. So I've been on Green Lantern for just about 2 years, and then at that point, the Emerald Dawn series had launched, and I moved on over after 8 years or so. A second stint of 8 years working at DC Comics, I moved over to Marvel.
Joe, I think you're the only one I haven't heard yet on that.
Well, you know that song on Sesame Street? It's like, one of these things is not like the other. One of these on the other in this panel here. Because everybody here has contributed so much to the mythology and the history of the Green Lantern character. And essentially, I did like 2 fill-ins with the character. So I was a fan. I loved Kyle Rayner as a concept. I thought, being a Spider-Man fan, he had that kind of everyman quality that Hal Jordan or John Stewart or some of the other Green Lanterns didn't have. You know, he's capable of making mistakes where the other guys seemed a little too perfect for me. So coming onto the character, I really appreciated that he was me, the everyman, interacting with the DC pantheon of gods. You know, I kind of like that concept very much that Ron and Darryl came up with. I thought it was a great idea. So it was a pleasure to work on it. You know, anything that DC could offer me with Green Lantern, I was like, give me a shot at it. So the first issue I did, I don't remember numbers, but I remember that Darryl was like behind schedule, so they had asked me to, hey, can you help out? You know, we need to finish up this issue. I'm like, sure, fine. And then shortly thereafter, like 2 or 3 months later, I got a call from the Superboy office, and the editor there, Frank Pitteries, he was like, hey, can you help out with the Superboy story? And Green Lantern's a guest star in it. I'm like, okay, cool. He goes, yeah, Darryl's falling a little bit behind. So I'm like Darryl Banks' closer. It's an honor to say that. But that's how I think they perceive me at the DC offices. So. But like I said, any chance to work on the character, I was a fan from the Silver Age, Gil Kane era. I was a fan from the beginning, so it was a pleasure. Every page.
We're getting a lot of info about Darryl here on this episode. All right, I've asked a few questions, but with all this talent on stage, I'm sure you all have a lot of questions as well. So let's start. Yeah, we have one in the back here on the right side.
Hey, Darryl and Ron, was it your guys' combined effort when we talked about Gil Kane's Green Lantern costume, the classic, but then Kyle had such a different costume. Was that kind of a year together, or was it an editor decision, or how did that come about?
Did you like the costume? It was all me.
It was the mandate was we wanted something. No, I've got to preface this by saying, remember the time period. This was early mid-90s where extreme was the order of the day. It was a time of foil covers and double-bagged extra trading card included. So glow-in-the-dark covers.
You guys are lucky you didn't have a ponytail and a leather jacket.
If I could show you the projected designs of Kyle Rayner and Parallax, it would probably scare you. So, yeah, I remember. I'm having flashbacks. Keep in mind, Image was used, and I'm still trying to make a mark. So I'm designing costumes that really almost feels like you should have joined Youngblood or something. And Kevin, our editor, was like, "You got to keep it simple because you're going to regret it if you come up with something super elaborate and you have to draw it." 22 pages, you'll thank me later. He was right. He was right. So the idea was different yet familiar. So that because Kyle's an artist, he's going to have that creativity from his ring creations to his take on his costume.
Wasn't it? I mean, Darryl did a bunch of. This was the days of fax machines. You guys don't even know what the hell a fax machine is.
Stone tablets.
So this was just pre-email. So when he did designs, they would come spitting out of my fax machine in my office. And actually, when I had to send scripts into the office, I had to call the editor and say, "All right, I'm going to send the script in. Make sure the fax machines, because multinational corporation DC Comics, owned by Warner Brothers, had like 2 fax machines, and you had to call and say, are they free?" But Darryl did a number of designs for Kyle, and then I think we ended up using like some of one and some of another.
We kind of
Frankensteined it together.
Came up with what made the most sense. The gauntlets and boots of one, the chest symbol of, actually the symbol was last. That was something they didn't want to budge on at first. Like, well, we want to keep the classic symbol. And I had already came up with the symbol, I think, first. And I had to talk him into it. Like, well, we want to keep the classic symbol. And like, we've come this far. So I had to explain why it looked that way. Well, since Kyle didn't speak the oath, I thought, let me imply it in his symbol. That, the reason it's split in half, like the brightest day, blackest night. Since he didn't say the oath, it's more like it's there subliminal. So.
I love the mask design. It was very modern and very
You loved it. There were many that did not.
It also disguised his face. It wasn't just, hey, my eyes are painted green. It was a true mask, and it was protective. Was there an influence?
Absolutely. I was a big fan of Marvel's Sunfire. Love that to this day. I can't tell you exactly why I like it. I like the fact that his mask didn't fall closely to his face. It almost has just the organic nature of it. But with Kyle, I wanted to have a little bit more angularity, but still the way that it goes around his nose, that's all Marvel Sunfire. That's where that comes from.
All right, what other questions do we have out here? Right up front in the middle.
So, in creating a new Green Lantern, coming off of characters like Hal Jordan and John Stewart, who are obviously well established and still very prominent in comic books, was there any sense of like intimidation that went into that, or was it just sort of we're going to create something new and enjoy what the stories that we're going to tell with this new character?
I don't think there's any intimidation because I had to write the damn thing so fast I didn't have time to think about it. I knew it was going to be a big deal storyline, but I don't think I've ever. The only time I've ever been intimidated writing anything in 28 years is when I wrote Doctor Strange Fate, because Garcia Lopez was going to draw it. And I was like, oh shit, Garcia Lopez is going to draw my story. It better be a good one. So I had stage fright for like 2 weeks, and then I realized that I could write any old piece of crap, and it was going to look great because Garcia Lopez was drawing it. And then I wrote the issue in a day and a half. But it wasn't an intimidation. It was really exciting. It was a big sense of freedom because we were getting to make up our own character, and DC was really great about letting us do what we wanted to do. It was not. I mean, when they said you make up a new Green Lantern, they meant. I asked 2 questions. I asked them if the main character had to be a male, or I could, make the lead a female. And they said we want to keep a male character as the lead. And I said, does it have to be a human, or can it be an alien? And they said it has to be a human. Other than that, they didn't tell me anything. They just let us make it up in concert with the editor. And so we made up the costume, we made up the name, we made up the background. And honestly, my inspiration for character, as Joe said, is that sort of everyman archetype where it's just a guy. Hal Jordan's already a hero because he's a test pilot. John Stewart, in his sort of refurbished origin, is ex-military. These guys are, as many of the DC heroes tend to be, they're already heroes. They are stalwart representatives of the keeping the right order already. So I grew up reading Marvel comics as a kid, and I wanted to have a more Marvel-style character who had feet of clay, and hopefully was going to be as interesting out of the costume as in the costume. So, look, man, I wrote Spider-Man. I wrote Spider-Man as Green Lantern, and Darryl and I were actually talking about this earlier today. I wrote Nova as Green Lantern because like when I was a kid, I remember picking up the first, year's worth of Nova comics. And just, thinking it was the coolest thing, because I was on the ground floor of this new Marvel hero who was interacting with Spider-Man and Thor and the Avengers and all this stuff. I mean, I was too young to realize that Nova was a ripoff of Green Lantern. I just thought it was cool. So 20 years later or whatever, I just ripped off Nova.
All right, what other questions we got up over here? Well, we'll get the microphone so everybody can hear, but as he's coming around, I just want to say one of the best things about getting to do this is I get a great view of the art that's happening right up here, so awesome. All right, question on the right.
Okay, this involves about the new Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner. When they had the girl, his girlfriend in the refrigerator type thing, when they killed her off, what kind of...
By they, you mean me.
Yeah. So how did that come about? Was that a mandate, or was it just... Because, I mean, that was really like... what was the movie with Brad Pitt, the one where they find the girl in the bag? Seven, yeah. It was kind of like that kind of thing, and, in comics, you didn't see that gruesome of a death usually at that point. It wasn't that relevant. I mean, nowadays, yeah, but back then, I mean, that was pretty did you get a lot of blowback on that?
No, I've never heard about a single word about it since.
He seems to be thinking differently back then.
Honestly, I mean, we knew I knew that character was going to die from the moment we introduced her. Part of the goal in introducing her was to have a character that you actually liked better than Kyle, because he was kind of a jerk to begin with, and he was irresponsible, and he really didn't deserve this power that he was given. And ultimately, somebody close to him pays the price for his irresponsibility. It's Gwen Stacy. It's Uncle Ben. The specificity of her demise, Alex, Jojo says what her name was, Alex DeWitt. The specificity of the manner of her demise I ripped off from Stephen King. Stephen King's Firestarter has a scene in which government agents come to the house and kill the girl Charlie's mother and stuff her body in either the washer or the dryer, I think the dryer. And I remember reading that book, and man, that was nasty. That was memorable. So I approached it as, this is a really evil character doing something really evil. and I want you to remember it, and I want you to feel bad about it. If you didn't feel bad about that character, if you weren't upset about that character dying, we weren't doing our jobs. We really didn't feel like there was a huge amount of, like, we didn't think it was going to be shocking, and we didn't think it was going to get the reaction that it did. I mean, we knew it was going to be upsetting to the audience, but it was supposed to be. The ironic thing is that the way that the book saw print was not the way it was drawn initially. That scene where Kyle comes home and, something for you in the fridge, dear, and he opens the refrigerator, Darryl drew the refrigerator door open and her body in there, stuffed in the refrigerator upside down. Her body whole, not dismembered, not mutilated in any way. The book was sent into the Comics Code, which was still Mr. Green Arrow here. The book was sent into the Comics Code, which we'd always thought was like a bunch of little old blue-haired ladies, with sour, puckery faces looking at the comics and deciding what was too far over the line. So they saw that and they flipped out. You can't show that in a comic. And okay, so Darryl had to redraw the page, had to redraw the panel, so that the refrigerator door was mostly shut, right? So what you saw in the comic, because we don't show you, like, what you don't see is more effective than what imagination kicks in comics and movies. So you guys are a bunch of sick bastards. Because you all figured she was cut up in pieces. Like, we got letters like, how dare you mutilate that body? And I'm thinking, that didn't happen. That's you. I've still got the copy of that page with the door open in my file somewhere. So being censored made the thing that much worse. So thanks, little old ladies in the Comics Code. And obviously it has since become it's become a meme, it's become a term, and deservedly so. I don't run an eye from it. And yeah, a trope in comics and in fiction in general is a lot of times, female characters are abused or injured in some way to motivate or affect the male characters. And I'm friends with Gail Simone, and we've talked about it quite a bit. And part of it in comics is that for so long, comics were male-dominated power fantasies. The heroes were, except for Wonder Woman, most of your heroes are men. That's been the way the comics have been. Thankfully, now it's changing. But they were stories for teenage boys. So you weren't going to kill off your main character, your male hero. So to have some sort of impact on the books in general, it was often the significant other that paid the price. It's the Gwen Stacy storyline. When I wrote Witchblade, I killed off their main supporting character, her detective partner. It had been in the book since literally like issue 1. I think I killed him off in issue 100 by throwing him off the Empire State Building. Nobody gave a shit. Like nobody. We got one letter saying, "Oh, that's a shame." So part of the reality is rules are different for male characters and female characters. That's the way it is. You have to be okay with it. Because